I'm Dr. Karen Hildebrand with AWS.
I am Vipul Bhutani from Avnet, and this is my architecture.
Can you tell me a little bit about what Avnet does?
Sure. So Avnet is a global technology solution provider company. At one hand of the ecosystem, we work with our suppliers, and that's where all the supplier technology comes into the ecosystem. And on the other hand of the ecosystem, we work with OEM customers, and these are the OEM customers who basically needs these technology solutions so that they can build their end products.
So what are the problems that IoT Connect solves for?
So basically, it's all about when an OEM customer comes to us, the OEM customer is well aware about how to build their own products, but they are not very well adverse about how the cloud connectivity or the cloud part of it, what let alone the AI all out of the picture, right? So the IoT Connect as an architecture supports them how you can onboard your device on day one from one device to a millions of devices, right? Out of the front without moving a much of a cloud part at all.
So those original equipment manufacturers are able to accelerate their designs.
Yes.
Fantastic. Let's dive into your architecture.
A sure thing. So if you imagine, as an OEM customer comes to us, what happens is, we have separated out the control plane as well as the data plane into it. And again, that's all about scalability, how we are able to scale that particular OEM customers. So when an OEM customer comes to us, we utilize a lot of features of the AWS organizations. And from there, we create a new organization for that particular OEM customer. From the AWS organizations, we run the CloudFormation scripts, which technically is just deploying the data plane all for that dedicated environment for that particular OEM customers, as well as we have an IoT Connect admin over here, which basically monitors all the data planes, right? So how the data planes are deployed, how many of data planes are there based by the customers, and basically how the data plane is doing. So that's the part of the admin jobs that we have. Now, of course, admin needs databases, so that's where we are connecting the RDS into it. So the admin works with the SQL servers or SQL databases, because we practically know everything about what's happening behind the scenes on these data planes. And then a major part of it, right, the API gateways are connected with the RDS as well as with the IoT Connect admin, so that the gateway can provide more API based details back to the customers.
Fantastic. So then let's dive into the data plane next.
For sure thing. So when the things comes to us, we already have a data plane set up. So we have distributed the data plane in 3 blocks. So basically the first block is the connectivity of it. So the IoT thing connects to an IoT core, IoT rule endpoint, and from that endpoint it goes to an IoT action, and that's where it happens, like, okay, what should I do with that particular data point? So that's where the IoT Connect endpoints are coming into the picture, and this is what we call like a connectivity block in our entire data plane.
Okay, so I've got my IoT rule and IoT actions. I know you have several of those that are
Yes.
actually pre-configured. How does the data move from the IoT actions into your next block?
Yeah, so there are like 12 of the actions that we move that we have in the connectivity plane of it. From the actions, the basically one of the action is to enable the Amazon Kinesis, and that's where the data goes into it first. And from Amazon Kinesis, we have a cold storage, that is where storing data for X months or X years if they want. And then we have a DynamoDB. Now DynamoDB is very unique in this implementation because it's a generic architecture, which means that we can connect a healthcare device with 100 data points, or we can connect a coffee cup or a coffee machine with like 10 data points. And that's where we need a NoSQL database out of it. And from the another endpoint, one of the rule also goes back to Lambda. And now what Lambda does, because we have 12x rules, we have 12x lambdas running into the system, and each Lambda has a very unique capability, a very unique purpose of it. So these 12 lambdas decide, okay, what happens on that data? Do I need to send an email out to a customer? Do I need to send a data out in a different database systems? Or basically that's where one of the lambda is basically responsible to sending the data out to an application layer of the customer. And that's where we call it, that's where the business applications are built for the customers.
Excellent. So that Lambda is making a decision of whether it's going to send it into a queue, whether it actually has to send a notification. So now at the application layer, I see some of my favorite services here. Tell me a little bit about what the OEMs are looking for when they're embedding AI and machine learning into their devices.
Yeah, sure. So basically, with all the AI rush happening these days, everybody's talking about, okay, how can I have an AI into my systems, right? And with the OEMs that we work with, usually wants to have a low cost solution, because they pretty much produces millions of these devices. So it doesn't make sense to have the compute over there. So what we have done from an architecture standpoint, the compute is of course staying in the cloud. We use Amazon SageMakers as well as integrated with Bedrock to consume a public models that are out there. And then that's where we work with our supplier technologies. And these supplier technologies basically allows us to embed the inferences that are coming out of these SageMakers back to these devices. And with these suppliers, every supplier work in a different way. So our SageMaker models needs to be have an inference coming out in quite some different ways that are out there on the field.
Fantastic. And you have talked a lot about enabling original equipment manufacturers. I know you cannot tell us about what they're actually building, but what are some of the industries that IoT Connect is being used in?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of quick serve restaurants, connecting their restaurants, connecting their machines in that particular restaurants. One of the interesting use cases connecting, construction companies where they are building systems, and then we have to integrate their devices into it so that we can provide them KPIs or worker safety into it when they are doing that constructions and so on. But I mean, there are varied fields of things that we are connecting onto the field.
So anything that is IoT-able can use IoT Connect.
Yes.
Great. Thank you for sharing your architecture with us today.
Sure thing. It was my pleasure.